Yeah, that's why Scott Galloway, Prof G, called it testosterone as the chemical of the year, right? It's not just the level of testosterone, but it's how we are viewing, masculinity as a whole within society and that disengagement that it drives if, we don't collectively have a healthy version of it and understand where it fits within our culture. I think that's pretty, relevant.
In a world defined by relentless innovation and geopolitical shifts, understanding what's truly next is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. This is RTX, the future. Your guides through tomorrow's complex landscape are two individuals with unparalleled insight. Jay Mazzelli, co-founder and CEO of Red Thread X, a retired Army colonel and a veteran leader in defense and technology innovation, brings decades of experience from the front lines of strategic development. Nate Platts, an active duty lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, actively shaping future capabilities through advanced data and strategic sustainment. Together, Jay and Nate offer a rare vantage point, having advised at the highest levels, navigated complex technological revolutions, and influenced the strategic implications of innovation long before they hit the mainstream. On RTX, the future, they cut through the noise to deliver the unvarnished truth about what's coming, why it matters, and what you can do about it. Stop guessing. Start knowing.
What's going on, Jay?
Hey Nate, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
I'm doing great. Can I say it?
Yeah.
2 words. Leg day.
Leg day. Always. Every
Sorry,
day's
I
leg day.
couldn't pass it up.
No.
But you know why I did leg day? Because I needed to get my testosterone up for this conversation.
Yeah, and this conversation is about testosterone, right? Testosterone, the chemical of the year. We talked about it in the Pluot report, and we heard Prof G mention that at South by Southwest. This is his idea, right? We're not as creative. This is not ours, but this is. It was such a compelling topic and conversation that we had to take that and run with it, and we had to write about it and think about it. So we're going to talk about testosterone, the chemical of the year, but it's not just biological. It's not just the hormone. It's more than that, right?
Absolutely. So, hey, first I want to say, so Prof G, for those of you who don't know, that's Professor Scott Galloway. Really, really interesting thinker. And his, like a lot of the other presentations at South by Southwest, his panel is really quite interesting. It's available on YouTube on the South by channel. So I'm a big fan of what Scott Galloway has to share because he really gives society a critical look. And the topic for today in the title, testosterone, the chemical of the year, that's provocative. I know it is. But we went with that because of exactly like you said, Nate, there's that physiological aspect. There's so many biological considerations about the role of testosterone for men and women in our bodies. And it has such a societal implication as well.
Yeah, we're gonna talk testosterone and really the societal impacts of that as it pertains to young men. And the trends that we've seen, that trends have been reported about, not just that we've seen. We're going to talk about kind of the opposite, right? And not really the opposite, but it's the trad wife phenomenon that has kind of been a big part of the social media cycle the last couple of years. So I'll just run down some stats that we found when we were doing some research, right? So only 1 in 3 men under the age of 30 has a girlfriend, right? And in contrast, 2 in 3 women under the age of 30 have a boyfriend, right? Largely because women are dating older men that are more established, that are more emotionally and economically viable, right? And so you have this mismatch of choosing a mate, and dating apps are kind of amplifying this and gamifying it, but also raising standards to an unhealthy level of expectation on both sides of the sex fence. 44% of Gen Z men had no relationship as a teenager, and 63% of men aged 18 to 29 were single in 2022. And that's what that kind of speaks to is what we talked about in the last 2 episodes, Jay. It's the key to longevity. We talked about biohacking. We talked about all the science out there that's enabling us to personalize our medicine and, Dr. Atia's Medicine 3.0. But the number one indicator of a long and healthy life is those social connections. And we have here, and we represented in, the brief stats, then I'll go over some more, but it's this widening of connection. It's this, I'm going to just go down and in. I'm not going to go up and out. I'm not going to make substantial in real life relationships. I'm going to disassociate and disengage from reality. 15% of young American men assess that they have no close friends. Scott Galloway notes that 1 in 7 men have reported having no friends, and 34%, this stat blows my mind, 34% of men under the age of 34 are living with their parents at home. And that to me is hard to understand or hard to recognize. I mean, I moved out when I went to college, and that's just a me story, right? So that's not everybody. But, at 34, I had 2 kids.
So what's alarming to me about that particular statistic you shared is I think that there are both economic and social or societal implications to that. So there's men in that age demographic who are just disassociated from society, like you described earlier, but there's probably some economic drivers as well. So this notion of testosterone's chemical year and the disenfranchisement and disassociation of men, how's that translating into the workforce and just overall social pressures?
So I can't speak to the workforce, but the social pressures is, I think, reflected in some of the suicide rates that are available in the stats that we've been able to find and that we reported on, right? Men are 4 times as likely to die by suicide than women. Recent data for England in 2025 shows that male suspected suicide rates at 17.4 in 100,000 compared to 5 in 100,000 for females. So almost more than triple the rate. 2023 males made up nearly 80% of the suicides in the U.S., despite being 50% of the population, right? So this is, I think, to answer your question, where are we seeing this? It's the deaths of despair. It's, I don't have the connections. I have fewer opportunities, or I perceive myself to have fewer opportunities. And so I don't have a way out. And I think that's the danger of this is without those social connections, you kind of get lost.
Right. Okay. And in my mind, I'm thinking through, we've got the lack of social connection and those pressures, and we're seeing an education gap where since 1974, women have been outnumbering men in college enrollments. And in 2024, the college enrollment by gender was 58% women versus 42% men. So as our society is continuing to progress, we'll have to do the analysis on this and come back in a subsequent report or podcast about, is that education gap and the disenfranchisement or the loneliness merging to create a gender disparity socially and economically, both. And we don't know the answer right now, but we'll come back on that.
That's a great question, right? I think, so this goes back to the title, testosterone, the chemical of the year. No, we're not talking about, how to get steroids or TRT, although I can't drive down a street here in Colorado without seeing an advertisement for a TRT clinic. But it's the metaphorical reference to, testosterone as a predominantly male hormone, although females have it and it's required for a healthy life. But it's, it is what physiologically makes us a male. And that metaphorical reference is, what does it mean to be a male in this society? And how is that trending? And what are the impacts for us as we try to navigate this tech culture where everything is being thrown at us all the time? So the testosterone, right? Like, it's not just the chemical. This is a metaphorical reference to the declining engagement of young males in our society today, and what are the implications for that, right? It's the symbol of disengagement. We talked about how, social connections are essential to a long and healthy life. And we have all this social media that's, driving us into our devices and into ourselves and not out and about. And we're seeing some very concerning trends, specifically in males and in young males. This is a symbol of disengagement, right? It symbolizes the declining role and disengagement of young men from societal pillars, and that's the concerning piece of this.
Well, and there's a really critical role of testosterone beyond just the physical aspects as well. And you mentioned whether it's steroids or testosterone replacement therapy and things like that out there. So I'd like to amplify your point with the potential vicious cycle or recursive effect that comes from testosterone's wide-reaching impact on human health. So there's not only the physical aspect, there's a mental focus and clarity of thought element of proper testosterone levels, but it also drives emotional well-being and as well as your sexual health and your longevity. So looking at the emotional health specifically, low testosterone is linked to depression. So you could have the physiological implications of low testosterone driving your cognitive, your state, your performance at work or at school or whatnot, and your emotional well-being. And then that ties to the dissociation that we're already seeing, which is going to amplify that sense of isolation or loneliness.
Yeah, that's why Scott Galloway, Prof G called it testosterone is the chemical of the year, right? It's not just the level of testosterone, but it's how we are viewing, masculinity as a whole within society, and that disengagement that it drives if, we don't collectively have a healthy version of it and understand where it fits within our culture. I think that's pretty, relevant.
And so this has got some really wide-reaching impacts. I think we're already seeing it through social fragmentation, and the model that I personally apply when I look at the social state and the role of men in our society right now. This might sound trivial, but I think it's a very accurate representation of the role of men in our society right now. If we look at the arc of television shows that specifically talk about family units, we go back to the 50s, predominant shows like Father Knows Best, pretty clear title, or Leave It to Beaver, where the father had a specific role in the family. We look at the arc, and then we start to see things like The Jeffersons or Archie Bunker, where the father figure was a little bit of a comical figure, a little bit of a caricature. And then we jump forward to like the 80s. We go 50s to 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we see characters like the Bundys in Married with Children, where the father is just this goon, and but for mom keeping the family viable, the family would fall apart. And granted, they're comedies in some respects, but they're still reflections of, I think, how our society is seeing the man's role in the family unit and in the larger society as well.
It's definitely something that we need to look into, and people are assessing this, and I don't know what the answer is going forward. As we've seen, the stats reflecting a kind of a decline in young men and understanding their place in this world. We've also seen this other trend, the trad wife trend. It's the thing that kind of has blown up in the social media. It's, women who are talking about the traditional wife role, but you would, talk going back to Leave It to Beaver, back in the 50s of, hey, I stay at home and I take care of the kids and my husband goes to work. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's interesting that it's happening at such a in-your-face way in social media, as we see also this decline in the mental health of predominantly young men, as it's reflected against their, similarly aged females. And I think that's an interesting comparison, right? It gives you something that you can base this off of in terms of, hey, you have this decline of mental health of young men, and you also have this rise of a trad wife trend, where they, literally hashtag trad wife. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but it is a pretty interesting dichotomy of these two trends happening at the same time.
And I'd like to correlate that to two of the statistics you offered earlier. So 34% of men under age 34 living at home in their parents' home. At the same time, we've got this emergence of this notion of the trad wife, and you've got 1/3 of men under 30 have a girlfriend, 2/3 of women over 30 or under 30, have a boyfriend, and so there's a simple arithmetic problem set here. A trad wife is looking for a husband to have that traditional wife relationship with. Men are disenfranchised. 1/3 of them are living at home. 1/3 of them may have a girlfriend if they're under the age of 30, but those other 2/3 of women are also out there. So I think we're going to see a lot of social pressure and potentially even reach a boiling point as we look at just where are the people, as certain men are looking for engagement, other men are disengaged and not seeking to get engaged, and women are looking for certain roles and partners as well.
Yeah, and we should say, like, this conversation that we're having, and a lot of the studies I hear do assume, a traditional, man and woman relationship, right? There are plenty of other things that we're not considering in this, but maybe we need to bring them in, right? There are all kinds of relationships, right? There's, guys and guys, girls and girls. There's nothing wrong with that, but this traditional look talks about, hey, what's the impact of young men as it relates to a biological relationship with the opposite sex, and then also with the trad wife. And I think it screams to the larger online versus offline reality that we live in right now, where, I don't post my worst days on Instagram. I don't post on Instagram, but you know what I'm saying? We don't share the hardest days of our lives. We say, hey, look at all the awesomeness, right? And I have to live up to that the next day. And so we have this missed opportunity for real connections and real understanding of us on a personal level. It's just, I'm going to show you what I want you to see, and what I want you to see might have an agenda. It might not, but it continue to drive a wedge between those connections that we need to make to be a healthy person and also, honestly, to have a healthy society.
This is a really important discussion that makes. I just had a moment of clarity as you were describing. Yes, first of all, this we're looking at a man and woman relationship. It does, certainly not exclusive the variations about relationships out there. But the moment of clarity I had was the pressure point that the overlap of all these different ideas we've been discussing over now 10 episodes of RTX the Future, our podcast. So as an example, disengagement of men as we're having the social pressures with the emergence of AI companions as a potential social outlet for people who are already not engaged in real life or IRL, further drawing them away from IRL engagements, amplifying the divisions that exist here or the gaps between people and their relationships. At the same exact time, longevity may give us the opportunities to live longer, but relationships are that critical underpinning.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I think, so what do we do about this, right? Just, this one kind of subset of a topic of society that doesn't, capture all the relationship possibilities, but it is the majority of relationships. And I think it speaks not just to, the physical attraction or, relationships between a man and a woman, but it talks about, or at least to me, it says, hey, we need to prioritize real life relationships. We need to continue to push that, right? As we're being driven online and into our devices and to amplify the things that are going so well in our life, to get clicks or to be influential on an online forum, we need to have those real life things that bring us back to being humans. And we need to, have some holistic online education that talks about, the impacts that we're seeing and the trends that we're seeing come to fruition. And do we want to go down that path, right? We talk about it in the report. It's tech's radical shift, and then it's humanity's choice. And in many cases, I believe that we're not making choices. We're having choices made for us. And it's not very often that we stop and go, hey, is this the right path? Is this the right way we want to go? Because I get concerned when I see, the increased spike in suicide rates among young men, especially as I have a young son who's going to be eventually a young man, and I want him to be able to find his place in the world. But how do we create a society where everyone can thrive, and we still have the connective tissues that makes us, human and makes us humanity? I don't know how to fix it.
Well, I think the most important thing, and you've been so clear about this, Nate, over the last several episodes, is how critical it is to have those real life relationships. I think there's two quotes that really help amplify this. One of them that I'm a big fan of is solitude vivifies, isolation kills. And another is from Henry Cloud. It's the difference between solitude and isolation. One is connected and one isn't. Solitude replenishes and isolation diminishes.
Yeah.
And as we look at that, there's a lot of things, a lot of forces pulling us away from each other, pulling us apart. Technology is one of them, whether it's the physiological aspects of testosterone or it's just some of the societal pressures that men are feeling, some of the societal expectations that perhaps women are placing on relationships as we're seeing some of these roles emerge. And you're exactly right. The public view of these things is anything but reality.
Yeah, and it's also, I think it's preventing us from having actual conversations and getting to know each other, right? I think we've lost a little bit of our ability as a society to have a conversation that is less than an argument, but we're not agreeing, and that's okay. You shouldn't agree with everything everyone does, but just because you and I don't agree doesn't mean that I hate you. Or it doesn't mean that I don't value your opinion. It's just, hey, we don't agree on X, Y, and Z. But we've kind of lost that ability, especially in public, to have these conversations in an educated way that allows for the space of disagreement, right? I'm not going to listen to you to understand what you're saying. I'm going to listen to you to wait so that I can say what I want to say. And I'm going to project it to you. I don't really care if you're listening or not. And so I think that to me is, kind of a tangent, but it's on the same plane as where we're at in terms of these are all about connections. And this is all about how do we find a place to ensure that we still have these connections as tech is rapidly advancing and, making our life awesome. Technology is amazing. It's doing a lot of great things, but we also, it can't be everything. And it's rapidly moving towards an all-consuming force. And we need to make sure that we're still humans at the end of the day.
I really like that line of thinking. And I'm going to issue a call to action, Nate. You and I have worked together before, and that I learned this lesson through a lot of experience. This is specifically, it has to deal with the men that we're addressing with this podcast with testosterone as the chemical of the year. We're remarkably dismissive of being close. So I think one of the challenges in this lack of personal relationships is it takes a lot for a man to open up and be vulnerable to another man. There's a lot of different things. So here's my call to action. I guarantee you that you have at some point in time in the last several days encountered another person, another man, and asked them something like, how are you doing? Or how was your day? Or something like that. And I bet you got a really dismissive response. Probably had a little nod.
It's good.
Kind of an upward chin nod. I'm good.
Good.
And, because when we worked together, that was our number one alarm of like, this person's being dismissive or they're trying to deflect the critical dialogue that's going to help bring them closer to someone and maybe expose something that's hurting them or something that they really need to get off their chest and talk about. So my call to action is, if someone gives you that dismissive answer, don't accept it. Ask the follow-on question. Just make it into a conversation and figure out what is causing that person to do the "I'm good," and try and close out the conversation.
Just push the door a little. Yeah, push on the door a little bit.
Yep, just push that door open and have the conversation and make that connection, because that connection could be the critical difference for that person for that day or longer. And in the end, you'll benefit too, because you just made another connection with another person.
Yeah, I like that call to action. That's good. Not an easy conversation in terms of the topic, but an important one. And I'm glad we had it.
I am too. And as always, Nate, it's great to talk to you. And thank you so much.
Yeah, good to see you, Jay. Take care. Till next week.
All right, take care. Be seeing you.